Hey everybody, and welcome to my video on applying to agents. This is a video that a few people have requested from me in the past. In the writing community, we're always trying to help and support each other in this crazy process, and I decided to do a video just to talk through all of my experiences. If you don't know me, my name is Emily Inkpen. I'm a writer of science fiction, novels, and audio drama, and poetry, and all the things, and I have an agent, and my debut novel is on submission to publishers right now. And yes, I thought I would share some wisdom. I don't know, we always talk, we always share our experiences. Let's hope it's useful. So, my submission process, it was highly successful. I submitted to 7 agents, sent 7 serious submissions, and I received 3 full manuscript requests, and one of those is now my agent, John Jarrold. So yeah, even in the middle of this, it was stressful. It doesn't matter how you do it, what you do. When you're in the middle of submitting to agents or to anyone, it is just, I'm submitting to publishers now. I can say it doesn't get any easier. Now we're on submission to publishers. It's like another level of stress and heartbreak when the rejections come through. So it doesn't get any easier. Way! But hey, we're all in this, whether we like it or not. So yeah, it's never easy. And there is the pressure of getting the right one. And there's the added pressure of the fact that once you've submitted, you can't resubmit. You can't submit to the same agent again. So that's it. And you hear stories about people who have tried 100, 150 agents. Those are the stories that I heard, and they seem to be everywhere. And it's tempting to assume when you start out that your experience is going to be the same. It can look like a mountain, because if each submission takes time, and you've got 150 rejections to get through before you're going to get anywhere, you get this feeling that you better get on it, because if you've got 150 rejections to get through, that could take years. Okay, so with all of this, I guess the temptation is to distance yourself from the process, and sending out blanket submissions pads you from having to care too much when the rejections come through, because if that rejection is just one of many, it doesn't mean as much. But the problem with that is this book meant something to you, and the relationship you build with your agent could be the most important working relationship of your entire career. It's not only normal to care, but I would say it'd be pretty odd if you didn't. So let yourself care about your submissions. Let it happen. It's going to be crap when you get rejections anyway. At least care about them when you're doing them. It's an emotional time. Accept that, own it, embrace it, but care about what you do and where you send your submissions. The fact is, these are qualified people, and they're going to want to help you reach your goal, and you want them to treat you with respect and treat you like the individual that you are. So you really need to treat them that way as well. And sending a blanket submission is not the best way to start. And they know blanket submissions when they get them. And rejecting a blanket submission, like a blanket style submission, is going to be far easier for them than rejecting a submission that clearly the writer put a lot of effort into. So when I started submitting, I tried the sort of advised method. I didn't blanket submit, but I tried the short, snappy email with 3 short, snappy paragraphs that gets to the point and gives away nothing of who you are. And I sent it to 2 or 3 agencies, and I considered them, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I considered them my warm-up round. I basically submitted to agencies I wouldn't cry about if they rejected me. And the reason I did this is because nobody gets it right the first time. Nobody gets accepted the first time. So I didn't want to apply to my dream agency on the first shot. No, I applied to agencies that I would have been delighted to work with, but not ones that were my absolute be all and end all. And it was a learning experience, and I'm pleased I did, but I've never heard anyone saying they did that out loud before, whether anyone else does, but that was my approach. Judge me if you want to. Needless to say, I got rejected. I'm not saying it's the format that caused that, but I personally think it might have been the format. So I changed my approach quite significantly. I found out about each one. I added them on Twitter. I paid attention. I did not submit to them the moment that I found them. And I think I gave it a week before reaching out or submitting. I wanted to let the idea of them settle. I didn't want to rush. And I wanted each submission to be cool and considered. So the submission criteria for each agent is very different. And with this new approach, I wanted to be absolutely right in how I submitted to them. And that's the joy of taking more time, is that you can really look at what they're after and you can make sure you get it right. So I was reading each one very, very carefully, and each, I mean, some of these can be quite confusing and ambiguous. I mean, the way they're worded, there can be things that you would rather know before you submit, because like we say, we got one shot at this, you want to get it right. So if you want to clarify before you send your submission, it is absolutely okay to do this. In fact, it's better if you do. Because by asking for clarification on something, you are doing two useful things. Firstly, you are notifying them that there's ambiguity in their requirements, which they may then fix. And two, you are introducing yourself ahead of submitting, thus getting your name on their radar. They know you're serious because you're looking at their requirements and trying to do things right. And now that they know you, your name will leap out at them because you've already made that contact. So this process of getting in touch before you submit can also reveal the true nature of the agent, and how they respond is very telling. If they're short with you, snippy and careless, that shows you as much about them as a blanket submission will show them about you. I mean, if they don't have time for you and they're not prepared to be respectful towards you now, what does that say about your working relationship in the future? You've got to ask. So what are the kinds of things I got in touch for? So my first experience with this followed an invitation on Twitter. After posting that I'd submitted to an agent, another agent, a soon-to-be agent, got in touch through DMs, and it turned out he's quietly building a list. And as it happened, I'd already found him, but his profile said he wasn't looking for submissions because he wasn't a full agent yet, but that when he was, he'd be looking for sci-fi. So I put him in my not yet, but probably bracket. So the conversation went really well because I knew him and he was keen to read my work. I got great feedback from him that changed my novel dramatically and for the better. He returned my submission with the feedback and with an invitation to resubmit if I took on board any or all of his suggestions. And I followed them all, resubmitted, and he requested a full manuscript. I would say as well that this is another reason to not submit to too many at a time, because he came back with amazing feedback that changed my novel, and he was absolutely right. Now, if I'd already in that one batch sent to 10 top agents who I really wanted to work with, and then his feedback came back and changed my novel that much, I've already lost my opportunity with those other agents. And what he suggested definitely changed the way other agents read my work. So this is another reason you do not want to blanket submit. Just take it easy and allow yourself some space. So the next agent, okay, so he had a line in his profile that didn't make much sense. The line was, welcomes applications from LGBTQ and BAME writers. Now, I am bisexual, so I pre-emailed asking if he meant writing from LGBTQ writers or writing about LGBTQ experiences by LGBTQ writers. And his response was very disappointing. He basically said, haven't thought about that. I will say now that if there are any agents watching this, if you're advertising yourself as the type of person who's making room for underrepresented people, the least you can do is think about how you're going to make that happen and what it will look like. Because it's not the job of LGBTQ people to tell you how to welcome them into your agency. That's not their job. And they don't have the opportunity. I sort of said to him in my email, I was like, look, my book isn't about LGBTQ stuff. It's not about being bisexual. So what do you want me to do? Like, I didn't say it quite like this. I was very polite. But I said, if I meet your criteria, but it's so irrelevant to my book that it would have to be a PS I'm bi at the end of the email. Like, what do you want from me? And yeah, he didn't know. I submitted to him anyway, and I really wish I hadn't, because it was a shoddy response and it said a lot about him. And he rejected my submission anyway, so I really, really wish I had not wasted my time with him, not naming names. So the agency, with the third one that I got in touch with proactively, the agency only had one email address to submit to, but I wanted to make sure that my submission went to this person specifically, and I DM'd him on Twitter and asked him how to make sure it found its way into his hands. Now, this was a great move because it told him that I was looking at him specifically, not just the agency as a whole. And DMing is an interesting approach. I didn't have a choice, as there was no email that I could send to him. There was no address for him specifically, only this one that went to every agent. So Twitter was really my only point of contact. I was friendly and I was personable in my DM, but very much to the point, because it is a very personal way to contact somebody. You don't want to be overly familiar. It was a professional conversation still. I think I said, hi, I would like to submit to you specifically, but there's only one email address. Do you have an email address that I can send to make sure that you are the person who receives my submission? Because I would like you to be the person who gets it. And the conversation was really, really great. And I went on to have a good relationship with him while we exchanged emails. And he also requested a full manuscript. So that was 2 full manuscripts, both of them following conversations preceding my submission. And there's a pattern here. The only time I've had full manuscript requests is when I have spoken to agents ahead of time. Now, submitting to my agent, John Jarrold, that was an interesting one. So John does these Twitter Q&As, and he used to do them weekly. I think he now does them monthly. Anyway, in his criteria, he said that he needed 3 comparative titles, and they had to be in the same genre, but contemporary and not bestsellers. A comparative title, for anyone who doesn't know, is a book that's like yours. So normally it's of the same genre, it has a similar tone, a similar structure, and it's to give an agent an idea of where you would go in the bookshop, where to position your book, how to pitch your book. It's like X. Anyway, in the Q&A, I asked him how imperative this was, because I wanted to submit my novel to him, but there are no direct comparisons to what I've got. And his compromise there, which he didn't have to do, he didn't have to compromise, he could have just said, well, there we go, good luck. But he said, okay, they don't have to be sci-fi. If you're having trouble, give me 3 comparative titles, they don't have to be sci-fi. So that was very good of him. But a week passed and I couldn't think of any books. Nothing came close to having anything in common with mine. And I was thinking, oh well, I kind of didn't want to go back to him a second time. Like, you know how you said I could use any genre? That's not it. I just thought, you know what, I'm too ashamed at this point. I don't know. I've got nothing. So I just thought, well, okay, that's that then. Can't apply to John. Sorry. But then he got in touch because he clearly noticed that there was no submission in his inbox. So he got in touch and asked what was up. And that was in DMs. He DM'd me. I was like, so, what's happening here? And I just said, John, I'm gonna be honest. I don't think there's anything like my book in the world. I am drawing a blank. And he said, okay, just give me 3 main points of inspiration and leave it at that. And I think my main points of inspiration were Final Fantasy VII, the biography of Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire, and the collected Hainish novels by Ursula Le Guin. So yeah, when he called, he called to offer me representation, and he agreed that there was nothing out there like my book, but he loved it anyway. So it all ended up well. But yes, my journey into comparative titles was not exactly smooth. I would say that if you are asked for comparative titles, there is no way you could ever have a worse start than I did. And it all ended up well for me. But get in touch with the agent first. If I'd come to the conclusion that there was nothing like mine out there and just submitted to John and just said, no, there's no comparative titles, without getting in touch with him first, that would have sounded really bad. That would have been like, okay, well, I've just decided that my book isn't, like, I'm not going to bother with this whole section of your criteria, but read my book anyway. Nah. There was an exchange there. There was an understanding we came to before I submitted to him in any way that was outside his criteria. And it was on him. He gave me permission to submit to him in a way that was atypical, that, wasn't within the parameters of what he would normally request. And I think that the outcome would have been incredibly different if we hadn't had that conversation first. So talking to the agent and getting that clarification, it can make a huge difference. And John is now my agent, and I couldn't be happier. He's a legend. So it all ended up well. And I'm really glad that he said that he didn't recognise any titles that were like mine, because part of me was scared that he would get my book and then he'd be like, what are you talking about? It's like this book, it's like that book, it's like the other book. And then I'd look like I know nothing. But luckily he was like, no, there's nothing like this. So all 3, of my successful full manuscript requests followed these conversations. Now, after I had these conversations, obviously I then submitted to them. What did my submission look like? I can tell you it was not the advised 3 short, snappy paragraphs in a tone that is completely neutral and to the point and no. Because I had spoken to them personally, I could address the emails as "Dear name, as we discussed, I am pleased or excited to be submitting my manuscript to you." It was very personal from the start because we already had a personal connection, and kept my emails to like 1 side of A4 in draft, but I used a very natural voice. I told them why I was approaching them. I told them a bit about my book. Obviously, you have to have that little, kind of synopsis-y bit. I told them how genuinely excited I was to be submitting to them, and it was true. Because I'd taken the time and I'd talked to them, I could genuinely say, I am excited to be submitting this to you, and I really hope you enjoy it. It was genuine, and that comes across. They know it. When you email them and you're able to be that personal, there's no substitute for it. They know. And they appreciate it because they're people. So yeah, that's basically it. That's a potted history of my journey searching for an agent. I'll say the process took about 8 months, and I submitted to 7 agents in that time. So I really was selective. Take your time. As a great person once said, the race is long, and in the end it's only with yourself. And it's very true, and it's amazing how applicable that is. So yeah, now all that's left to say is good luck. You have a book. You have the resources. It may take more than 7 submissions. In fact, I'm going to say it is likely to take more than that. I've never known anyone else get an offer with so few, but it might be down to my approach. I'm not saying I've cracked it. That would be a crazy claim. Luck always plays a huge part, but clearly it worked for me. And maybe it will work for you too. Give it a go. Give it a shot. Obviously, change things, make things your own. I'm not you, you're not me. Don't try to be anyone but yourself, and that's why the cookie cutter applications are just so meh. Be you. Do this your way. This is your journey. And you're going to end up sharing it with an agent one day. Bring them on your journey. Define that journey from the start. That's about it. I think I'm done. I don't think I have anything else to say. So good luck. You'll get there. Let's just make it not 150 rejections, because that would suck. Okay. Right. Go forth, spill some ink, kill your darlings.